How many times can you guys recall with your parents telling you, I love you?
To
0 to
this
10,
day
0
to
to
this day, my
50?
mom's never said it to me.
And my mom didn't say she's only said it, I want to say twice or two times or three times.
Think love was woven into kind of evolving in priorities as I grew up.
After leaving the corporate 9 to 5 grind, I became the boss of my own spiritual business, helping others explore and navigate the human experience from insight, wisdom, and lessons learned along the way. Today, I help aspiring spiritual entrepreneurs gain the confidence to share their gifts with the world. Welcome to the Happy Healing Shop podcast. I'm your host, Trang Pham Nguyen, and each week we'll dive into incredible stories of strength, resilience, and transformation. So, if you are ready for some serious breakthroughs, laughs and tears, and stories that will inspire you, you are in the right place, my friend. Let's get started. Welcome to part 1 of a special episode where deep conversations reveal the unique challenges and experiences of growing up in an Asian culture. My 4 remarkable guests have been so kind to open up on their personal journeys, shedding light on the intricate layers that shape their lives within this cultural context. They'll be sharing their stories of generational trauma, the struggle to break free from confinements, understanding where they came from, and finding their authentic selves. Our candid discussion delves into the distinct ways they were treated, the trials of navigating family and cultural expectations, and the immense pressures they face from such a young age. Join me as we explore the impact of Asian culture on their lives, unveiling both the good and the bad that come with it. And as we gain insights into their journey, we hope to give a deeper understanding of the diverse ways cultures shape our identities and influence our paths. Please welcome our guests, my friends, Kristina, Shaun, Thuy, and Victor, as they generously offer us an eye-opening glimpse into their own world. Hey guys, welcome to the show.
Hello.
So today, I know this is a topic I am very passionate about, and I had conversations with each and every one of you. And sometimes I forget that even though I was surrounded by Asians growing up, other people might not understand the nuances that come with it, especially with gender roles, expectations in our culture, and things like that. So, Kristina and Shaun, you guys are both Filipino, and Thuy, Victor, you guys are Vietnamese, just like me. So, but we still have had really all similar upbringings. So, this might be a first loaded question, but how do you explain to someone who's never experienced an Asian upbringing culture? Like, how do you tell an alien that, like, let's say, visited the earth and say, like, this is what it's like to grow up Asian or to grow up under Asian parents?
Well, can I start? It
Yeah.
kind of varies if you're first generation or second generation, and how you came about getting here. So, like Vietnamese people, a lot of us had to escape on a boat, and that sometimes varies with like the way that you grew up too, because I know that even there's many similarities with being Asian, like the pressure of overachieving, the pressure of comparing with other kids, and you're always being compared with other kids, like as an example too. And definitely grades were huge, and there was a lot of aspects of shame and respect to the family, and then just traditional things where they wanted to keep things being traditional and not expanding further besides being Asian. And then there's others that, like their parents were maybe more open to that. And so I think that part of it really varies too with like certain Asian aspects. Does that make any sense?
Sure, yeah. I agree with the first half of what Twee had mentioned. It's a lot of comparing to um other family members. It's you got to strive hard in school, you got to get good grades, you got to be a doctor or a lawyer. And that was uh my experience growing up in an Asian household, having those expectations, high expectations for myself, not really having parents that were open to other career paths or anything else, but definitely a lot of expectations that they want us to meet, and just a little bit closed-minded.
It's funny because everyone's nodding right now, so we can all relate. But let's say someone's asking, like, okay, so they want you to be successful. What's wrong with that? So can you guys kind of explain how that has affected you guys growing up and also as adults today?
Yeah, I'll chime in here. So I think what Thuy mentioned was really, I think, important, the idea of like first generation versus second generation. Of course, people have different interpretations of what is the first generation, what is the second generation. Personally, myself, my parents did come from Vietnam back in 75, and so I was born here in the States. But I think something that I hear a lot and something that I got to experience too was just the idea of like different opportunities. So the expectations are set differently upon you based off the opportunities that you had. So a common theme I hear a lot of times, both personally and also I've heard it from friends as well, is the idea of like, oh, like I expect X, Y, and Z because you have X, Y, and Z, right? You had the opportunity to go to school since you were a kid. You had the opportunity to go to college. A lot of these other things that I think the older generation didn't necessarily have growing up. And so they're almost kind of like living vicariously through you, where it's like, oh, like I didn't get to do this because I had to, leave my country. So now it's kind of like your duty, your role to kind of do that. And I think that's where a lot of the tensions arise, is because, like you're almost trying to do something, you're almost trying to live your life, but almost live like two lives at the same time. And I think that's where a lot of that Asian household experience comes from, is the idea of like you're not only trying to fulfill your own goals, but you're also your parents. And sometimes it may or may not be just depending on your view on that. But I think that's a good way I would explain kind of growing up Asian and the expectations that you encounter growing up here.
I think there's also a lot of pressure on doing things for the family, and it's very family oriented, and depends to like what religion you are. If you're Buddhist or Catholic or Christian, that has a big role in it, with the tradition aspect, where they want to keep the tradition, but they want you to be Americanized as well. And so there's a lot of duality in that, like a lot of mixed messages, and then there's another part of it too, where they came here because they want you to have a better life. They want you to pursue your dreams, but yet, like, if your dream was anything different than the doctor, dentist, accountant, pharmacist, it's like not valid. You know what I mean? It's not encouraged at all. And I remember my mom saying to me when I won an art contest, and I came home and I was so proud. She's like, Thuy, artists make no money. They die and someone else makes the money off it. Be a doctor, dentist, or lawyer. Next year, I win again. Another contest. Thuy, what did I tell you last year? Artists make no money. They die and someone else makes money off of them. So it's like this polarity of and duality of it. They want you to do, follow your dreams, make money, but that's like the big thing, making money. And so also so that you can maybe provide for the family too.
Yeah, so I'm going to echo what everybody has already said here, and phenomenal input too. I'm going to liken this to a metaphor as this big full toy box, right? So growing up in a traditional Asian family is like having a toy box that has been filled up with your grandparents and parents even before you were born. So these toys represent like your traditions, your values, your expectations, right, that they have for you. And in this toy box, there's a correct way to play with those toys. Just like how some families might teach you to treat action figures gently, or putting puzzles away the right way. Asian parents might have specific ways that they want you to approach them, right? How to play with them and how they want things done. And so this can be anything from how you speak to your elders, to the subjects that they want you to study, right, in school, or even who to be friends with. So the content and the approach to playing with these toys are so strictly curated, and you can't deviate from them, even if it's harmless. or come from a place of age appropriate curiosity, right? So any deviation is a sign of disrespect, and there are consequences to that, right? And moving away from that a little bit is that your parents are also like the strictest teachers who you continue to see even after the school day is over. So they want you to do really well in school and do traditional activities, right? They believe that hard work is what will make you successful and better later in life. But sometimes it feels like a lot of pressure, right? They might not always praise you for getting things right, but they will always point out when you do something wrong. And so there's also this theme that family is super important, right? As you guys have pointed out, it's like having a big team and everyone helps and supports each other. And honestly, it's amazing to have that support. And sometimes though, it means doing things that you don't want to because it's good for the family. And those things can make you uncomfortable and even feel wrong. And, sometimes it goes beyond like respecting your elders, but to what point? To the point of abuse? Like, what does that mean? It's such a big deal to even think of disrespecting your elders. It's like always letting them go first in a game just because they played it longer, is what I'm thinking of. And there's also this, sometimes in Asian families, kids are taught to be, to listen more and not to speak up. So it's a bit like being in a library where you're told to be quiet a lot. Perpetually just be quiet a lot. And so back to that toy box metaphor, imagine if every time you showed your toy to your parent, right, they check it for scratches or if it's still in top condition. And that's similarly with grades, achievements, or even how well you're being obedient. And those are all important to Asian families. So they're like report cards for how well you're playing with the toys in life. And your parents often compare you or compare your scores to your friends, to your relatives, and sometimes even to themselves when they were your age, right? And oftentimes, here's a secret, you're doing way better than they were at your age, right? And another aspect of it is like mistakes can be a really big deal. Just like in some video games where you have limited amount of lives, it feels like you can't make a mistake without big consequences. Parents get really upset. People in your family get really upset if you're out of line and you go out of their expectations, right? So for Asian kids, growing up in a non-Asian country, first of all, it's like having two toy boxes, and one from their parents and their families, and one from the world that they are currently in. And sometimes it can be a bit confusing to figure out which toy box to play in and how to mix those toys from both, right? And it can be fun to have access to both of them. And often not, it's a great source of happiness, but also a great source of distress and loneliness. So just reflecting back on it, I think it can be really tough to see friends who have game modes who are in easy mode, and they don't have very strict parents, or they don't have a lot of pressure put on them. And conversely, it's really tough when you see friends with fewer rules or more freedom, but every player has its game settings. And so that's my 2 cents on living in an Asian household.
That was a really good metaphor, and being able
Totally
to,
good.
in a way, articulate to someone what it feels like. Do you guys, so it sounds from all of you guys, I'm getting a sense of confinement, feeling oppressed, even at such a young age as kids, right? It doesn't start when we're teenagers, it starts when we're like, I don't know, when we're born pretty much. So how do you think that has held you back in life?
I think it makes us a little bit more timid and afraid to speak up, because we have to listen first and observe. And so then sometimes we don't speak up at all. And it also, I think, hinders us from our emotional development. For me, I know that my mom wasn't really good with emotions or expressing them that way as well. And so, and also physical touch was a big thing too, where there wasn't a lot of physical touch or like hugging, so I think, like, just emotional wise, I think we have a harder time with it, and also claiming our emotions and identifying them if we feel them, but we don't know how to explain them.
I think in terms of, yeah, I think what Thuy had mentioned also, like being timid, I think contributed to me being an introvert, not really having a lot of time to, or no time at all to really hang out with friends outside of school. I wasn't really allowed to hang out because, or even do sleepovers because it's too late, or my mom or dad or whoever was upset, or not upset, but like cautious, like, oh, are they going to be okay? Who's in the house? Is it your aunt, or is it a cousin, and how are they like? And just playing it safe kind of hold me back from spending time with other family members that truly wanted to hang out with me, and especially at a young age, and even like a grandparent who just wanted to spend time with their grandson. Never had as much time with that. And also going along with that, it also with interacting with people, networking, or career development, because we talk about, it's either you're a doctor, a lawyer, or a disappointment, essentially. I was originally supposed to go to medical school, went through pre-med track in college, and did my best, went through all the help sessions and studied really hard and asked for help, and still didn't get the grades that I wanted to. And so, of course, if you're not getting the results that you want, you lose that passion. And so, of course, breaking that to my parents was really hard. And so, of course, not wanting to go through medicine, how do I pivot from that? I knew that my business degree was one of my strengths, and I still wanted to be in healthcare, so I married the two and decided to pursue healthcare administration. But even getting into grad school, of course, it was like a breath of fresh air, not having parents hounding you about, like, okay, did you submit your medical school application? How did you do on the MCATs and all that? Building that skill to interact with people and network and kind of make that connection at like a networking event or at a conference, that took time. And I didn't have any guidance from my parents on that because they never did it. And because they would go to a job, whether it's being a nurse or like my dad, he's an engineer. They would be in their job for 30, 38 years, 40 plus years. That's one job and for the rest of your life. But in my line of work, it's normal to jump every couple years to get a better salary, to get a better title, to grow and learn. Learning that on my own was tough and challenging, especially being an introvert. But with all things, of course, it took time, and so that's one aspect where I felt that I was held back by being in an Asian household.
So in regards to emotional intelligence, we almost never have, it's like a one-way communication line, where we grew up where it wasn't really us expressing ourselves and our emotions and our thoughts. It was more so us always receiving. And so in regards to just evaluating like our mental health and evaluating our current emotional state, it was very hard because we never really understood where we were because we never got to talk about it. And for me, at least, my experience, whenever I would talk about like how it would feel or like what I'm thinking, it would always somehow turn back onto me and somehow like bite me in the back. And somehow my parents might use it against me, be like, oh, like, you're like this because of this. And so I was always restrictive in a large portion of me growing up. So like entering high school and college, where a lot of conversations would come about, people being more open to each other, I was always very reserved and very kind of restricted and very emotionally detached, where I didn't want to express myself. I didn't want to talk about how I was feeling. And that in turn reflected my relationships, right? Friendships, girlfriend, a lot of aspects of my life, I realized I wasn't being open about. And in turn, I was conveying my emotions in very toxic ways, right? Like I would be very passive aggressive. I wouldn't know how to talk about how I'm feeling. I wouldn't know how to talk about what's like, well, what I guess is going on with me. So that in turn would cause a lot of like turmoil. And then I think that a large part of that comes from how you're growing up, right? Like, are you actually able to have the communication with your parents and people that you're close to? So I think, with such confinement growing up, I think that caused that. And then that also turned related to, I think, what Shaun was talking about in regards to networking. I think I'm more of an extrovert, at least more so introverted extrovert. Introvert might be just from my Asian upbringing, but within Asian communities, I noticed that I'm usually a little more open. I can talk more freely. I can have conversations with other people. But like when I go to like corporate, more, I guess I would say like diverse ethnic communities, I realize it's really hard for me to communicate because especially in my Caucasian white counterparts, they can hold on conversations forever, be so willing to talk about themselves and be so open. And I'm like, man, like, how do I do this? Like, why is it so hard for me to like just so be free and be open and talk about things that like people might judge me for? I was always afraid of being judged because I was always judged growing up, at least by my my upbringing, my parents. And so I think that kind of prevented me and halted me. And also part of that is also my parents always told me like, put your head down, do your work, get good grades, don't talk back, yada, yada, yada. And that in turn led me to also just realize that like in corporate setting and just in the career growth and for your career growth, being more vocal, being more open, being very like proactive and being like, oh, like, I think X, Y, and Z versus just doing it progresses you a lot more and a lot faster. And I do think that that's something I'm trying to build upon, but definitely wasn't something that I had already instilled in with me growing up.
All these themes just remind me of certain things that family would say and would get repeated over and over again. And it's a result of, this is how we are today, right? So some things that come to mind is, children must always respect their elders, right? But that doesn't work quite well in this society. And I'm talking about American culture, right? So while respect is foundational, that can also deter like open communication, making it harder for us to really assert ourselves or voice disagreements even in the workplace. So if you're never given the opportunity at home to conduct good conversations, how are you ever going to do it out here? And I think it's just ironic how our family brings us to America assuming that we're going to have phenomenal opportunities, and in the meantime also maintaining the culture that we have from our home. That's simply unsustainable. You need to assimilate as well as you can here to be successful. And the most successful people here I find to be very opinionated. And if you're just there in the corner not talking, guess what? You're not moving anywhere. They don't think that's you're thinking. And that's the trouble that we find ourselves in. So, another one is, we've been instilled to think if you don't do well in school, just like you were saying, Victor, you'll regret it later. I was always told school is do or die. Your life hinges on performance. Your priority are your studies and not your friends. Friends were so discouraged. So that's another element of isolationism, this kind of narrative of this strong work ethic, and it also creates this anxiety about the future or fear of making mistakes. It's a reoccurring theme that keeps happening amongst Asian Americans. And again, we have to be very delicate in how we handle that. And no one's going to understand it, right? Your bosses are not going to understand that. Your parents are certainly not. So this is an unfortunate side effect of growing up how we have.
Another thing that they pass on that I'm really starting to realize more is like prejudices and stereotypes. Because I remember like growing up, like, oh, only white people do that. That emotion, and they categorize and then they pass that prejudice to you, and sometimes you do that without even knowing it. And so I know that I have to be really conscious of that now. And then now, like all these other trends coming up, and they're very, very judgy about it, and they're very opinionated. And so we have to be really discerning how we address them, and now how we address our kids. And then it all comes back once again, looping around to the whole respect thing. If you speak up on it.
Yeah, speaking of irrational fear, I think the frustrating part is I've spoken to some of you guys on this, how obviously our parents, and when they're in survival mode trying to flee from poverty, they really do need therapy. But there is like that notion, I feel, of I am your elder. There's nothing, I know better than you. So who are you to tell me that I need fixing to go to therapy? And speaking of stereotypes and everything, like, yes, I feel like I grew up with, let's be honest here. At least my parents, I know a lot of other Asian parents are like, don't date a Black person. You better not bring someone like that home, or even like a Hispanic. Like these people are not, like our parents, a lot of them are racist. They won't admit it, but they are, and to bounce back previously, what you were saying is just with the health criticism, it's even nitpicking like, oh, you're too fat. Oh, you're too skinny. It's like, okay. And then I keep feeding you. Why don't you eat my food? It's like, because you told me I'm too fat. So it's just really that seesawing between and feeling confused, even growing up as a kid, or even them nitpicking at you. They're really good at criticizing, but again, their own parents were very critical and criticized too. But the thing that how it affects us nowadays, I feel, is that we grow up thinking, oh, we're doing this project, we're in a relationship, but in the back of our heads, we're thinking, are we not good enough? Because that nitpicking voice is still speaking to us. And so it does affect our self-esteem, right? So we bring that low self-esteem to the career, to relationships, and also that programming, I guess, of saying, I can't talk back. And so I shouldn't voice my concerns. I shouldn't voice how I feel, or I shouldn't be vocal. So even, parents want us to be successful and have money, right? But we can't even be vocal about salary negotiations because we already feel scared of talking to an authoritative figure. How do you feel towards your parents? Honestly. I know it's there's a lot of complex layers there.
I just explored a huge part of it about a month ago when we had a family reunion of types. Growing up, I always thought my mom was weak, but now I know that she's the strongest person. And then also becoming a mother changed our dynamics. I was close to my mom, but not like close as I am now, where we can talk to each other more. And she's working on it too, as like now she's got all these mixed kids, 4 grandkids. And so she has to, but my relationship has gotten a lot better with my mom. And I don't really know my father. And so there's mixed things about that. And so I don't have any say there. But as I've gotten older, my relationships have gotten better, and I've become more understanding for her. And it's because I've done the work. So I hope that it furthers, and I'm standing up to her more. And then I switch it to her, and then she'll get mad, and she still won't ever apologize. They don't apologize. They are never at fault. That's a hard thing for them to do. Even if they know they're wrong, they will not apologize. And then they kind of just shut down, and they don't like really talk about it still, but it is up to us to open that door. And then, because how would they know if they've never been exposed to it themselves, and then their parents treated them, and so we can only change that through awareness, and hopefully like they will, but we can't expect them really to ever change, and we just have to accept them.
I think when I was a kid, I was close to her. I remember I would spend a lot of time with her. She would even take pictures of me like when I was a kid, just to capture the cute moments. And I was always by her side, always hanging out with her. I always hang out with my dad too when I was a kid, but I think around that time is mostly my mom. But as I've gotten older, tables have flipped with that. I'm more so like with my mom, we butt heads a lot of disagreements. You know, my rule of thumb is, whatever a sane person would think, or someone with, clear mind, whatever they would think of the opposite, the total 180. That's what my mom would think. Um, has always been critical of me, has always, um, kind of like what we talked about and what you mentioned earlier, Trang, where it's like, oh, you're, you've gained weight. I could see it in your face. And or you're not allowed to do extracurricular activities anymore because your grades have gone down. Again, limiting that social interaction with folks my age, um, or just preventing me from uh, hanging out with my dad's side of the family, because she knows deep down that they mean well, and that they truly, like, yeah, they're Filipino, and it's again the importance of family, but also they just want to have a good time. They're not much about the drama or chismis, that we, Tagalog word for gossip and whatnot. But it's always been tough with my mom, especially with the career change going from steering away from medicine. That really affected her a lot, to the point where she called me a disappointment, to my her side of the family, to my cousins, to my uncles. Um, I think around that time, yeah, sure, it hurt, but I'm not gonna lie, it motivated me so much more to get into grad school and kind of like, yeah, follow my passion, follow my dreams, but also to show that, yeah, I can be successful in any other ways. And I could say I did it my way, and not because of you. But on the other hand, with my dad, it's always been great with him. Like we had so many good memories even from when I was a kid, even till now. I feel safe going to my dad. I can talk to him about absolutely anything. If there's something troubling me, whether it's um, finding a job, if it's finance related and trying to get some tips on, like, investing, or what would you do type thing. It's always a teachable moment. But as a whole, how I feel towards them collectively as a unit, um it's always gratitude. I'm very grateful, despite how the things that my mom has said and done and criticizes me. um I'm always I always think back, like, without them, like, I wouldn't be who I am today.
For me, anger and resentment, because I've had to work through so much to become my own individual self. Grateful for all they've done, because the journey to survive to come Vietnam is not easy, and trying to grow up from poverty was not easy. And also sad for what they had to go through, but also sad for what I had to go through as a kid of being an adult at such an early age.
Yeah, I'd have to say it's definitely a mixture of different emotions. I think, what if you were to ask me this question 6 years ago, 7 years ago versus now, it would actually be two very different answers. But I think for me it's a mix of like compassion. I think, again, like what you mentioned trying is just like the sense of like what they had to go through, and understanding that like a lot of the reasons and why they act or think of a certain way now is because of their past experiences, which I haven't had to go through. A lot better now, but there was a big sense of resentment, I think, growing up, just with both my parents at different levels, at different relationships with them. I think just a lot of the ways that I had interactions with them was very it could just cause eventually a lot of resentment that I had, especially coming into like college. Definitely way better now. And I think a point of also like understanding and trying to get to a level of understanding. I think now that I'm older, have a job, kind of living on my own, I think my parents now kind of see me in a new light, and in more an idea of like probably more respect. So now I'm able to kind of talk to them more evenly, which I think allows for more developed conversations. Even talking about stuff like mental health was out the door, like until maybe about like 2 years ago, that finally being able to bring up and not face like a bunch of backlash on. So I think now it's like those three, I think combination of like compassion, resentment, and now like understanding is kind of the emotions I think I feel with my parents now.
Yeah, piggybacking off of what Victor is saying, with understanding, I think today my relationship with my family is kind of a blend of understanding, respect, and distance. So as we've grown older, there's been an unspoken mutual realization that we see the world differently. And while we strive to find common ground, there are still moments where the cultural and generational gaps are evident. And growing up, breaking free from my family's expectations was the hardest challenge. You know, they had a roadmap for my life, and deviating from it, from that plan, often led to accusations of being ungrateful, or even betrayal was the most recent one I heard, and that really hurt me. But establishing boundaries was another difficulty. It's not easy to tell the people who raised you that you need space, both physically and emotionally. And they often saw it as rejection or even abandonment, right? And there's also this piece of like codependence, and that was a silent issue, right? So, and it's so prevalent amongst Asian families. So our lives are so entwined, and that decision I made for myself felt like a decision that I would have to make for the entire family. You know, that weight of guilt and shame was often overwhelming. Every time I considered a choice outside of their framework, I'd hear echoes of what will people say? Or how could you do this to us? So despite these challenges, you know, I also recognize, like as Shaun and Victor and everybody has said, I recognize the sacrifice that they made and the love behind their intentions. It's just been a journey of understanding, empathy, and self-discovery for all of us. But yeah, I do agree, Trang, there is that initial resentment that slowly evolves over time, as to what Victor was saying, in understanding.
I'm just more appreciative of her now, and that she's doing the work too. And I just really have to like step away from it and not let that judgment affect me, so that I don't become resentful. And it is constant work. And it's almost like I feel like now we have to mother them, or, you know, kind of be in reverse and set our tone with them as well. But they can change. You just have to have a lot of patience. So so it's a mix of appreciation, gratitude, and anger.
How many times can you guys recall with your parents telling you, I love you? 0 to 10, 0
to
to
this day, my
50?
mom's never said it to me. And I'm 45. It's not in her love language. But she can say it to the grandkids, but she can't. I don't think she's ever really said it to like any of her own kids.
Every day, whether we talk to each other on the phone or through text. My parents have always said, I love you to me.
Yeah, I think with my dad, so with both my parents, I had to be the first one to say I love you first. I had to kind of break that that I guess that wall, that invisible wall that was there for like, I remember I was 19 when I first said it to both my parents, differently and respectively. My dad said it back, and my mom didn't say. She's only said it, I want to say twice or 2 times or 3 times since, you know, like I've been around, I guess, on this earth. But with my dad, though, I think he was a little bit more open. He's been a bit more emotionally communicative. So I have heard it countless of times since then. But yeah, I think I was the one who had to kind of break that ice.
So I guess in my household, I've heard "I love you" plenty of times, but I think it's the intention behind it that matters. I think love was woven into kind of evolving in priorities as I grew up. So as a young, as my parents were like younger, their love was displayed in ensuring that, meals were served, that school uniforms were pressed, or that, tuition was arranged. There's a lot of focus on efficiency and the well-being of the family. Again, it's the family. But as they age, this love kind of manifests as like a persistent invitation for family outings, inquiries about my personal life, kind of broaching my boundaries at certain times that I don't really want to get into with them, or like simple wishes to have you around. I mean, these are all great things, right? So what was once love shown through like an act of service and structure has kind of evolved into, something that's expressed through longing and presence, because they can't take that back anymore. We're in our 30s, we're much older now. And they had missed a large chunk of our lives focusing on something different. So as a child learning to how to love, though, I sensed that love was transactional, and it was equating my family's sacrifice with my obedience. And it often left me questioning, is this love unconditional, or is it laden with hidden conditions? I did feel 100% love from my mother recently, and that was when I had finally told her that I was getting out of medicine. And that is so big, you guys. When you tell your parents you don't want to pursue something that they had their entire life set up for you, it's hard. It's heartbreaking for everybody involved, but it was written in the walls, and she knew that it was coming. And I asked her one day, do you feel disappointment in me? Did I make the wrong decision? Like, how do you feel about this? What do you feel towards me? And she said, I'm not disappointed that you didn't go pursue residency. I had already gotten my medical degree. I'm disappointed that no one knows about what you do. And that was just it felt so good to me, knowing that she made that effort and to learn what I do for a living. I mean, what Asian family does that, like when it's not readily known to the public. And so I'm in like health informatics, digital health now. And but that's just something that I was like, my mother loves me. I get it now. She does. And she's trying.
Tune in next week for more. This conversation was so in-depth and interesting that I had to create a part 2. The magic continues over at thehappyhealingshop.com, where you'll find tons of resources to help and support you on your journey. Until next time, my friend, always remember to shine your light brightly and to share your story, because you'll never know who it can help, give hope to, or inspire to create a change in their own world. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next week.